Getting underway. I declare the meeting open and I'd ask you to invite you to stand to say the opening Karakia.
Whakataka te hau, whakataka te hau ki te tonga, kia mā kina kina ki uta, kia mā tara tai, e hi ake ana, kura, he huka, he hauhu, ti hei mo.
So welcome today to our Regulatory Processes Committee meeting. Please note the meeting is being live streamed. Please let me or Democracy Services, Sean here, Officer Johnson, know if you intend to leave the meeting. And morning tea, if we're still going at 10:30, morning tea will be at that stage. So I move that the Regulatory Processes Committee accepts apology for absence from Mayor Foster and for Councillor Wolfe for lateness. Seconder, please. And Councillor O'Neill. Seconder, Councillor Matthews, thank you. Put the motion which has been moved and seconded. Please vote. Thank you. Yes, we do just have a quorum. I declare the motion carried. I call on members to declare any conflicts of interest they may have in relation to any item on the agenda. Okay, I move that the Regulatory Processes Committee approve the minutes of the meeting held on the 14th of April. They be taken as read and confirmed as an accurate record of that meeting. There is a slight amendment. Partway through the meeting adjourned, it says at 10:31 a.m. In fact, that should be 11:31 a.m. 11:31 a.m. and reconvened at 11:34 a.m. instead of 10:34. So subject to that minor correction. And remember, that was the meeting at which we had a total of 11 councillors present at different stages. So that was a record in my almost 8 years on this. Yeah. Well, we are popular at times, but not quite so much today. Anyway, seconder, please. Councillor Condi, thank you. Got to share the love around. I put the motion which has been moved and seconded. Please vote. That is carried. There are no items not on the agenda. So we'll go to public participation. We have one public participant, Patrick Morgan, well known to us from the Cycling Action Network, and you know the drill, Patrick, yeah? 10 minutes.
Okay, I'll do my best to keep it brief. Good morning, councillors. First off, thanks to council staffer Alistair Helm, I think it is, who did the work on getting this traffic resolution together. This is Wakefield Street between Chaffers and Taranaki. It's been 4 years we've been asking for this, and I think it's really good to see that we're moving from a say to a do phase. This is about delivery, so I think there's a real common sense decision before you today. We're talking about a 7 to 9 a.m. clearway between Chaffers Street and Taranaki on Wakefield. I've been down there twice in the last week, and I really confirm what council officers have said, that it's a very low occupancy part of the network in terms of parked vehicles, and there's plenty of parking on the far side of Wakefield Street at that time. It's a key route for people who ride bikes for a couple of reasons. One is that there's a bunch of people who like to go quite fast, and we want to keep them off the waterfront. So to do that, we need to offer a viable alternative. And Wakefield Street is part of that. It also works for people heading to Lower Cuba or Victoria Street to access the rest of Wellington. So this is consistent with your vision for livability, for safety, and for making our city more attractive for people however they get around. It's also consistent with the Let's Get Wellington moving vision of moving more people with fewer vehicles. I did get some feedback from some of our members that 9:30 would be a better cut-off time. the person was making the point that for many parents who have domestic responsibilities, dropping kids off at school or childcare, they delay their trip into town until after 9. I'm not sure if we can amend the Clearway proposal at this meeting, but I think it's something to be considered in. Yeah, maybe someone could help me with that, but maybe it's something we could consider in future, that clearways don't end at 9 a.m. Instead of thinking about the 9 a.m. as a cut-off because that's when many shop hours open, we think about 9 a.m. as being the time when many parents need to move around the city by bike. I think that's it. Any questions? We're on page 159 if anyone is wanting to look at the feedback, and from a glance through it you can see there's strong community support for this.
I have a question, but I'll let you go first, Councillor Matthews.
Too kind. We do have time, don't we? I'm interested in that 9:30 because also, I mean, a lot of shops actually don't open till 9:30 or 10. So, you know, there is, I think that is quite an interesting kind of idea, and when there is a bit more flexibility around working hours. So, yeah, I mean, have you noticed quite a few shops? I'm trying to turn this into a question. Quite a few shops are also not open till after 9:30.
Yeah, I think, again, this is about making it more convenient for people who want to get around our city. It doesn't just mean peak hour commuters, but people make journeys at all time of day. And I think we need to build for everyone, for the many, not the few. I'm not sure if anyone can answer my question about, is it possible to amend this traffic resolution at this point to go to 9:30? No. Okay, there's a process, right? Okay. Well, we might be back here again. Okay.
Yeah, thank you, Patrick. My question is, there was a small amount of opposition from businesses there, and some of those were suggesting that cyclists, they already have the option of using the waterfront, that they should use the waterfront, and you're saying that that isn't a useful suggestion because of the speed aspect. They've got to be limited in terms of speed on the waterfront, whereas they can go somewhat faster on the Wakefield Street.
Correct. There's two responses to that. One is that we need a viable alternative to the waterfront for people who are in a hurry for whatever reason or like to ride fast. But more than that, Wakefield Street is part of a network, so we're building not just single routes in Wellington, but we need to provide access to all of the city, and Wakefield Street is a key connector that runs towards the west for people heading to that part of town to access Cuba and Victoria. Again, on parking, there's plenty of parking right across the road. So, yeah, I get it. It's a different use for the street, but I think we can live with this one. In fact, what we'd really prefer is a proper cycleway along here. Again, we need a network throughout the city, not just a bunch of part-time clearways. We don't have part-time footpaths, do we?
Thank you very much.
I'll take questions on anything else while I'm here, but you're all busy, so that's...
Yeah,
Yep.
Sure, we'll see you again in the near future.
Okay, thank you for your attention
Thank you.
and your questions.
Rightio.
Okay.
Bye.
Cheers.
Ta. Okay, moving to general business. Item 2.1, 2 new licences on reserve land for the Brooklyn Junior Cricket Club, and the Capital Kiwi Board Trust. Will invite officers Falgo and Peter Clinton to the table because I have one or two questions, and no doubt others may well have questions too. Welcome to the table, Peter and Val. I'll kick off, and thank you for getting back to me in terms of with that email, Peter. Can you just explain to us, because my question was because we're 10 years down the track from when they first came into being, the Brooklyn Junior Cricket Club, so it's 2011. My assumption was that they'd had 2 5-year leases along the way, but that isn't the case, is it? Can you explain what has actually happened, please?
Good morning. Thank you, Councillor Sparrow. Yes, You've perhaps highlighted a small gap in the history there. So while Brooklyn Junior Cricket Club was established in 2011, they only have a relationship with council since 2018, when in fact in 2017 they decided to construct a third additional cricket net in Vogelmorn Park there, and that is the basis of the licence application, and that was granted in 2018 for the term of 3 years, and that expired in 2021, and so this is a new application for that particular space, for the use of that particular space. So they have, you're correct, they have had a history before then, but not a relationship with council until 2018. Is that helpful?
Thank you. The licence to occupy is in terms of the net, so they don't have a building there themselves. So how come they were able to get by for 7 years, in a sense, without going through the necessary channels to request that licence to occupy?
There were public cricket nets before that period. So there's 2 cricket nets.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you, Val.
Hi, kia ora. There is some history there. The original cricket nets, although built by the Brooklyn Club, Junior Club, they were open to the public. When they wanted to build a new one in 2017, they wanted to have more of a club use for these cricket nets. And at that point, council officers deemed it necessary to have a license to cover for their own club use. So with that negotiation, what happened there was that they kept the old one. They're maintaining both cricket nets, but the older one is open to the public, and the newer one is just for club use, which is a good kind of mix for the nets, and that is the reason why there wasn't a license originally.
Okay, thank you. I have a further question, but if any other council has a question in the meantime. Okay, my other question is on page 13, it says there's a requirement in the licence for the licensee to have a health and safety plan in place which is reviewed by the council park rangers before a new licence to occupy is signed. So my question is whether that has been reviewed by council park rangers. I'm not sure that it states that it has. Do we know the answer to that?
I'll have to get back to you on that one. There is a health and safety we are reviewing now because there's some development near the cricket nets that we have required them to raise their safety net. So I'll have to review where the new health and safety like site-specific plan is right now, but we do require it before we have a new license signed. Hope that answers the question.
Okay, yeah. Well, I'm happy to approve this on the basis that that condition is met. Okay. Right. Well, we have here the request for the Brooklyn Junior Cricket Club to be licensed to occupy the land for a further 5 years plus a renewal term of 5 years under the Capital Kiwi Trust Board to be granted a licence for 3 years. I move the recommendations in the officer's report, recommendations 1 to 4. Seconder, please. Councillor O'Neill, your turn. Thank you. Do you wish to speak? Okay, is there any debate on this? Councillor Condon.
Just to say how exciting it is to see Capital Kiwi getting some facilities. It just feels like it's becoming a bit more real. The project is moving along, so it's super duper exciting. Thanks.
Yep, it is. Yep.
Yeah, just to speak briefly to this, and I mean, it is good that we're finding purposes too for buildings which have become available. So I think that this is a good use of this building at on Macro Road. Now I'm supportive.
Thank you. Okay, I'll put the motion which has been moved and seconded. Please vote. Thank you. That is carried. Thank you, officers.
Thank you,
Appreciate your
councillors.
time. Okay, item 2.2 on the agenda, road closure. Yes, we will invite Sean and Maria to the table. Any questions we may have? It's page 17 on your agenda. So it's road closure of Normanby Street from Rideford Street to number 14. Any questions? I do have one question, and that is point 14 on page 19. It says, street activities will advise at the meeting if any objections have been received for this proposed event. So my question is, have we received any objections?
Yes, we did. Yes, we have.
Oh, okay. Can you please elaborate?
One was from New World in Normanby Street and Rideford Street. They objected to the time frame that was originally set in the request, and they have, with the producer, they've worked out to reduce the road closure from 4 o'clock to 7 p.m. as opposed to what it is now. End's still the same, and on the option dates are still, the road closure will be from 7 p.m, not 4 p.m.
Right, so both parties were comfortable with that
they're agreed,
compromise?
yep.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Right, any other questions? Okay, well, thank you very much for that. So the proposal here is for closure of the road for hours of darkness from 7 p.m. through to 2 a.m. for filming a TV series called Wellington Paranormal. So it makes sense for it to be filmed in the dark. And it seems to meet the various criteria for a road closure. Therefore, I move that we accept recommendations 1 to 3. Seconder, please. It's your turn, Councillor Free. We're taking turns here. Would you like to speak?
No, I do love Wellington Paranormal, so I'm looking forward to seeing the episode.
Okay, is there any debate? A fairly straightforward issue. Right. Okay. I put the motion, which has been moved and seconded. Please vote accordingly. Right, that is carried. Thank you, officers, Sean and Maria, for your time in this. All right. Item 2.3 on the agenda is the Park, Sport and Recreation Traffic Resolutions, page 27. And we'd like to invite officers. Who do we have? Joel DeBoer, David Soul, Matt Bialy, and soon to the table.
Marina.
Miranda, to you too. Any questions from councillors on these?
Did you want to just start by giving us a bit of background into
Yeah, sure.
how we ended up with this package of PSR traffic resolutions? 'Cause
Yeah,
it's
so
not like our regular set of traffic resolutions.
no, they're reasonably new. PSR collaborated with Parking Services and the Roading Network team over a number of sites throughout Wellington's reserves and town belts. We've had an increasing demand and also complaints from some of our clubs and other facility users about the perceived lack of car parks that we provide. And what the sites include, the ones in the town belt include Hanson Street and Stoke Street, which has a Rugby League Park, the Cook Islands Community Hall, Karate Scouts and Wellington Pipe Band Clubs. The other one is Alexandra Road, which has the clubs of the Harriers and Wellington Croquet. Newtown Park Stadium, which includes the zoo and obviously the stadium itself, the park, the athletics track. The other reserves include Kilbirnie Park, which includes obviously Kilbirnie Park, the Aquatic Centre, the library and the recreation centre, as well as playground and Plunkett. And the other two which we've included for paid parking are the Botanic Gardens, and I would like to point out that it was resolved by Council 10 years ago that the Botanic Gardens have some form of paid parking there because the amount of use that it does get and its closeness to the CBD. And the other one's a bit of an anomaly. Thornton Pool is the final one, again for paid parking during the winter months when the pool is closed. At the moment it gets used by people commuting and is basically used by default as on-street parking when in fact it's not. So we work closely with the clubs in the areas and a lot of talk over the years with Kilbirnie Park because of the amount of use it gets, and also we undertook surveying of many of these sites as well and found that they're 80% capacity, which under the new parking policy suggests that parking restrictions are required. And because of that perceived lack of parking, what we've noticed through those surveys was actually we have people storing camper vans, trailers, derelict vehicles. We also have a number of commuters utilising these and also park and rides. So they're being utilised by default for park and rides. So we introduced these proposed restrictions to ensure that the facility users get as much capacity as they possibly can to enjoy those spaces, noting their town belt and reserve, but they are considered as roads under the Public Transport Act and the road bylaw.
Thank you for that. Question from Councillor O'Neill.
Thank you. I was quite curious about this piece of work when it started being talked about, or I heard about it last year. Are we quite confident that we've done a good audit? Are there any parks that we are still looking into, places on our greenbelt that we are yet to kind of reach a resolution on parking?
Yeah, there's quite a lot of work to go through and do all the surveying to ensure that we're meeting our own policy. And these were the priority sites that we identified. Of course, some managers within PSR would have liked other sites to include. I suppose one of there will probably be more coming in the future. I think Evans Bay Parade, we have a public boating ramp there and also a marina, which is starting to get filled with more park and ride. It's quite obvious, evident to us, and making sure that people still have access to recreational facilities. But there are a number of throughout the city that not as a high priority as these ones.
Cool, awesome. And then I know, sorry, and the range of groups that you've included as a part of your consultations and other things and the surveys, I was just a bit curious about the volunteer organisations, specifically like friends of a particular kind of reserve or specific people who do a lot of the work with the park rangers in that area. I was just wondering if those priority parking for PSR is able to be kind of used or shared out with our friends of certain green spaces and things like that? How does that
I'm sure that can be accommodated. I think you'll find that these ones, that there are alternative parks. So for example, Newtown Park, we're only actually looking at the front entrance, so the north side of the stadium. So behind there'll be ample parking in that area. Again, the Botanic Gardens, there would be parking on the road, as well as Kilbirnie Park that wouldn't be restricted. So I don't think that's going to be an issue.
Cool. Thank you.
Yeah, babe, thanks, Matt. The other thing to keep in mind as well, when there are events on that may run for a weekend, such as the aquatic diving champs or something, the normal course of action is to put a sack over the sign, which has events over it, and we would communicate with parking services to allow for extended periods of parking during those times. So we have thought about those things. That's a question that comes up. So if there was a large planting day or something and we wanted to utilise it, that wouldn't be a problem.
Interesting. gorilla sacks and being able to continue, getting your weeding done and stuff like that. Thank you.
I'd just like to point out, one of the challenges of this was actually coming up with a time frame that suited all the users as well, which was a challenge to just get that balance right.
Deputy Mayor Free.
Yeah, thank you. I know how much work goes into thinking about the exact, the solution. I hope those sacks don't become sort of black market items. But look, my question is really around the capacity to monitor this. And I guess there's no point in us creating these wonderful schemes that are meant to be just, the optimum solution if we can't have the workforce to go out and enforce it. So has there been any thought given to what's needed to enforce it?
No, good point. And we have been working with parking services quite closely, actually, in the first instance, to look at the best solution that can be enforced. And then with Roading Network team as well to bring this to you today. So yes, no, they will be monitored by parking services to ensure that they are enforced when necessary. Of course, because it's something new, we won't be enforcing in the first few months. We will give people a little bit of a, heads up, and that maybe they'll let it go on and reminding people that this is now restricted parking.
It's great. I can see Kevin and his team nodding away in the back there, so that's very good.
Councillor Condry.
Thanks, team. One of the we got a few kind of complaints from staff who were working at the Wellington Regional Aquatic Centre, and I asked a question by email that I've got an answer, but I wonder if you could just for the councillors who are here, just talk a bit about. Obviously, we've got some staff who are concerned about how it's going to impact on them, and can you talk to us about that?
Yeah, I suppose I'll want to step a little bit higher and look at the broader how we look across all of our facilities. So one benefit obviously out at Kilburnie is there's lots of parks, and if you get there early you can get one. But as a rule we don't actually provide set parking for all staff. What we do need to do is make sure that we've got sufficient parking available for health and safety reasons near the entrance, and this is for staff that are opening and closing the facility. They might be there at 5 o'clock in the morning, leaving well after 10 at night with not many people around. So we need to have the shortest route from the door to the car well lit, because while we like to think nothing would happen, we need to minimise any risk that's there. We did work with the management there and did talk to multiple staff. There are 10 parks available in the site. Majority of those will be utilised by the pool. There's only one park that's for the rec centre, and I believe there's another park or two for the library. So I'm talking, being selfish here and talking pools and recs, but to recognise libraries there as well. We also, if I suppose the likes of Waitohi up in Kilburnie, if we had parking there for all of our staff, there'd be no parking for customers. The primary purpose of the parking is for users of the facilities in the area, whether it be the sports field or not. But what we have identified are some spaces that if there's an emergency where someone can't get somewhere, normally like in loading bays, staff can park in the loading bays, because actually if a truck comes for delivery and we know, and they'll let us know, we can get their keys or we can get them off shift to move the car to have that access. We can't do that for a general customer parking in that space. So we'll continue to monitor the situation, but I suppose it's a change, and some people are a little bit resistant to change.
Thank you. Another query I had was around the St Pat's parking. That seems to be one of the main problems, is that St Pat's students are parking in this car park all day, going to school. And one of the concerns was that allowing the parking to be P180 meant that students would be able to go for the morning at school, P180, lunchtime, come out, move their car to another park in the parking space. P180 gets them to the end of the school day. Are we going to be monitoring that to see if that continues to be a problem? What are your thoughts on that?
I think, like Joel said, it was quite a task to try and determine the different time frames around it. When we looked at the P180 at the back, I can't remember the exact times, but I think the school starts just before 9, and lunch is 1. So you sort of, or no, it's after 1. So it actually goes beyond the P180. So that was one of the things in there. If we find that I believe if we find the issue continues and that the pattern goes there, because we hear it from our customers, we see it from the staff, then we would come back and look to change the restrictions. We had to be cognizant that some people might go to the pool, they might go and do an aquatherapy class, they might then go and do another class, have a sauna. So P120 was actually, we needed to have some provision for the P180. There was another point that came through around mobility parking, and that's another thing that we will continue to monitor. What the staff have done in the past, because it's often the hydrotherapy users who are the people who are less willing and able to walk long distances, which is why that parking is so important. They do take longer when they actually go to a class, getting in, getting changed, getting afterwards. And if I'm honest, a lot of them now often go and have a coffee somewhere together and have a bit of social time. So we had to allow for that. So what our staff have been doing is been putting cones out to basically in those parks to hold the spaces so that people can get them. Our belief is that when that parking becomes more free, hopefully through this resolution, that will meet the majority of their needs. But if there's still more demand and need for additional mobility parks, that is something we do on an evidence-based approach, recognising that that is one user group that uses that space, but a lot of other users also use it. So as soon as you take one park into mobility, it then gets lost to other users.
Thanks, and I see the argument for wanting to have P180 parking. It makes a lot of sense. It's just that particular concern. Kevin, can I assume that we'll maybe get a few parking wardens out 3 hours after the start of the school day? When we Thank you, Kevin. I mean, I'm all for starting with warnings, but let's let's get stuck in there. The final question I wanted to ask was about the parking at the Rose Garden. I was just surprised that we didn't have any feedback from our tenant, the cafe people. And normally, when we do anything around parking, we hear very strongly from the retailers in the area. So I was just wondering if there have been any conversations that you've had with our tenant about their view on this.
We did talk to Paul, who owns Picnic Cafe, and I think it would be fair to say that it cuts both ways for him. He didn't want to see the opportunity for people to sit around in his cafe to be restricted for more than 2 hours, but he also understood and is in favour of turnover of the car parks.
Deputy Mayor Free.
Yeah, just a little comment. Again, just about public perception. So if staff are to be allowed to park in loading bays, I was just wondering if it's possible for it to be clear that they have permission to do that, with maybe some sort of thing that goes on the windscreen. Or otherwise, I know what happens. People will ring us and say, I notice that there are people parking in the loading zones and no one's enforcing it. Yeah. And similarly with the sacks, just hoping they'll be really super obvious that it's an official thing. Well, I can kind of imagine the temptation to waltz up and put a sack over a parking sign.
The general signage that we normally would have would be authorised vehicles only. I can look into obviously having something that the staff have on there. Yeah, that can be on there. Yep.
No, just for transparency. Thanks.
Councillor O'Neill.
Thank you. Just 2 more parts. So noting the conversation we just had around the pool about a gym, a swim and a coffee maybe, and that needing to be P180 car parks. I note for rather self-interested for the rec centre uses that certain classes and skate sessions normally take between 3 to 4 hours sometimes, and that there are a lot of events on there. So I was just wondering why we looked into mostly just having P120 car parks around the rec centre, why that's different.
During the times that we're proposing, which is Monday to Friday in sort of your 8 till 6, is that correct? Yeah. a lot of the classes are actually 1 hour or 1.5 hour classes. The things that occur at night, whether it be roller derby or the weekend, that's when the longer events generally tend to happen, where they're actually the parking restrictions aren't in place. I believe that's correct, isn't it?
Yes, yeah. One of the biggest constraints we do have is the cricket, which lasts all day, and hence we haven't always gone for the weekends at these places.
Yeah, cool. And then just the last question there. So I noticed in a couple of submitted feedback, people raised the issues of bike racks and bicycle parking, and officer response was that we were looking into this. I was just wondering on the timeline of that and any thinking we've done.
So I've asked the manager out at RAC to already start monitoring the usage of the current bike racks, so they actually have a feel of how busy they really are. And we've got a closure due at RAC in July through August, so hopefully we can use that data, and it would be nice to actually have those at the back of them if we're going to put more in. And saying that, we know that we'd have to, obviously, one of the other points was around the type of RAC, so that's one thing we'll need to look at and trying to engage best use of space, accessibility into the facility. Often there's a lot of large groups of children at the front that congregate, so we would need to think of a design, but that's, we're looking at that actively now.
Cool, thank you.
Okay, there being no further questions, hand over to Councillor Condi to introduce the report.
All right, thanks team. So I don't need to do too much introduction. I think we all pretty understand what's going on here. I think for me the two that seem to have been the most controversial were around Hanson Street in Newtown, and I think that's an area where close to the hospital they are suffering a lot of commuter parking in their street, a lot of informal park and ride of people possibly going to catch the bus. So that's a street that's already feeling like their on-street parking is under a lot of pressure. You could feel that coming through in the feedback. And I think one of the things I followed up with officers is that really the solution to that is going to be when we actually manage to look at the parking in Newtown as an area-based parking survey, which is going to be one of the first ones that we do under the new parking policy. My inclination is that while I absolutely acknowledge that's going to be stressful for the people in that street, I think we do need to push ahead with this traffic resolution so that people are actually able to use these recreational facilities. I take it really strongly that this is town belt land. And, that means it's for recreational purposes. It's not there as overflow parking for the residents who are there. It is specifically in legislation that it has to be for recreational purposes. But just to say that the Newtown area-based parking plan is coming along, work is happening on that, and, we are all very eager to see it, as I'm sure the residents of Newtown. The other one that we've had quite a bit of feedback is around the metered parking at the Botanic Gardens, and it's interesting to hear that this is something that council resolved to do 10 years ago. That's always was fascinating to hear how these things float around. It's certainly an area when I go up there that it can be pretty difficult to find a park and get in there, and I can see why the retailer would want to see our tenant there would want to see more turnover, because that's obviously going to be good for business as well, to make sure that people can come in and enjoy the area. That said, I have a little bit of concern about us actually approving that traffic resolution at this meeting. As you all know, we have a delegation to approve minor traffic resolutions, and when that delegation was given to us, I kind of gave an assurance to all of our councillor colleagues who aren't here that if we had a resolution that came up that was a bit controversial or that was possibly a bit more than minor, that we would kick it up to the parent committee so that it would be considered by a committee of the whole. And I do feel like this one might meet those criteria. I know that at least one ward councillor doesn't support us going to the metered parking in this area. Personally, I do support it. I think it is necessary. I hear the challenges that we're trying to address with this. So at this point, I think my suggestion would be that we could amend the recommendations, that we approve all of the other traffic resolutions, but that we recommend that Botanic Garden one to the Planning and Environment Committee. recommend it to them for approval, so that it would go to a committee of the whole for everyone to consider. But I would be keen to, I haven't made that change yet because I just think let's actually talk about it and see how the rest of you feel about that one. And if we're in agreement, then we can make that change. And it would go to a meeting in June of the first Planning and Environment Committee meeting. This would be the appropriate committee at this point. Do I have a seconder for the paper?
I don't need to speak. Yeah. But I do think it's quite a good idea. I suppose I'll just briefly say I think that is quite a good suggestion. I think the botanical gardens are a very key area of interest for a lot of different groups. And as we've even heard, the cafe is sort of like this, can see both sides of what we're proposing. So, and there are no doubt quite a lot of interested parties, sports and all sorts of things take place there, as well as recreation and tourism. So, yeah, I think it probably does deserve a little bit more of a think, given that we heard some concerns raised, and given that we haven't officially heard ourselves from our cafe owner either. So I think that I would support your suggestion, Councillor Condi.
I think Joel, Joel, would you like to make a comment?
Sorry to interrupt. I'm just wondering if I can help provide some clarification because on this one, it's important to note that there is already restricted parking at Botanic Gardens. So it is a minor change in regards to we're going the next level up. We're not just bringing in the restrictions and putting parking in. As the parking policy talks about a level of restrictions, and the first one is putting restricted parking in, and the next one is to put in paid parking.
Councillor O'Neill.
I was controversially going to ask for officer advice, but thank you, Joel. Maybe just a question that Councillor Condi can answer in their right of reply. What kind of further discussions do you seek to have, given we've already gone out and consulted with the community on this, and this has been publicised for up to a decade that we need more paid parking in the area? I'm curious to understand maybe some resistance from ward councillors that if you're happy to share those conversations too.
Sure. I mean, it's not so much that I would expect we would go out to consult again. I think we have consulted and we have that information. I just think that because there's a number of interested parties, that going to a committee of the whole where we know that all the councillors have heard and been able to be part of the debate would be valuable. I have Councillor Young did email me and say that if the intention is to deter non-facility users from parking there, then the introduction of a $2.50 per hour fee will not act as a deterrent, and better to keep it free but restrict it to 1 hour. So, you know, I've got at least one ward councillor who's not sure that they're on board with the change. It's not, yeah, it's more just that I think, you know, with the way that the delegations are written, this is one where I feel like maybe we should let the committee of the whole have a say on it.
Yeah, I agree.
All right. Given that everybody seems to be in agreement, should we take a very quick adjournment so that Sean and I can... Okay, Sean reckons he doesn't even need an adjournment. We're just going to keep going. He is very capable. I know that the parking changes out at Kilburnie, I think, are going to be really welcomed by the facility users out there. I certainly was out there for a health and safety visit, and we, were looking for a park out there. You can see how busy it is, and we saw some St. Pat's students getting into and out of their car in the parking lot there. So, I can really see that that's that one's going to be a challenge. There was another issue that I saw around one of the pieces of feedback we got on the Newtown Park was whether we can introduce some sort of counterflow for cyclists through there. And I thought, I don't want to hold up this traffic resolution, but that's something that maybe we could look at, because apparently cyclists are using that's a useful alternative route, according to one of the submitters who gave us their feedback. So That's something that we might want to look into about whether we need to update that in the future as we see how that plays out. All right, Sean's got us ready to go. So just to note that this is not, we're not just kicking it up to the committee to say do whatever you want. We are recommending they approve it. So everybody who's voting for this today is recommending that it should be approved, that it should go ahead, but that we just feel that it's more appropriate to make sure that it goes to a committee of the whole.
I'll just ask one more question to officers at this point in regard to that. There is no time pressure in regard to putting this through. If it's delayed by a further month, it's not going to make any great difference, right? Okay.
Okay, Kevin, do you want to come up to the podium?
Yep, that's a good idea.
So just to say that the revenue implications from this are built into the budgets for long-term plans. So the effective date was for all of these was looking to be the 1st of July. So as long as we're able to, and there is some work that would need to be done to allow us to get that parking area ready to be able to be used as metered parking from 1 July.
Well, yeah, I guess my question is, you know, what the timeframes are on that, and when the we also have a date for when the Planning and Environment Committee meeting is going to be.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, it was late June, wasn't it? 23rd or?
Okay, in which case that is quite late. Let's adjourn for a few minutes. Let's adjourn for 5 minutes
We'll check the diaries for the council meetings.
Yeah, we shall adjourn for 5 minutes or thereabout.
Liam, I don't know if you can hear me.
We've just had a look at the timetables, and it turns out actually it would be much more convenient to take this to council. And since council clearly has the delegation to deal with that, that's great, because there's a council meeting sooner than there is a planning and environment committee meeting. So we've just made that change, that we're now recommending that council approves the following traffic resolution, and that meeting will take place in the next week, next 10 days. Yeah. So it'll actually, and that will happen just before the LTP deliberation, so it actually all kind of flows in quite nicely. But as I said, we've kept this wording that we're recommending that council approve, which is to give a strong message that this committee does support and approve this traffic resolution. It's just that given the undertakings we've made to our colleagues, that we think this should go to a committee of the whole. With that, unless there's...
Yep.
Are we able to take number 3 separately, please? Sorry, Sean. Or 3 and 3A. Are we ready to vote? No more debate?
Right, so which one are we talking about taking separately? Is this...
Number 3 or 3A.
Right. Okay, let's vote on 1 and 2. Okay, that is carried. And that is carried. Okay, thank you very much, team. Appreciate your efforts. We have item 2 for traffic resolutions. Do we wish to go to morning tea? We shall carry on and hopefully be able to have morning tea within the next little while.
Might be at the centre here.
Yeah. Is anyone likely to have any questions? My notes say that we call officers to the table if we have any questions, but do we? Look, if anyone, yeah, we'll adjourn for 5 minutes and you can grab a quick cuppa in that time. business. Item 2.4, traffic resolutions, page 127 in our agenda. We welcome Officers Wendy Ferguson and Soon Kong to the table, and do councillors have any questions for them? Because if you don't, we shall move on, and Councillor Condi will continue with the report.
Excellent. All right, so we've got 4 traffic resolutions, all of which are relatively minor changes here, apart from the one in Wakefield Street, I think, is where we're introducing a morning clearway. It's certainly quite significant, and Patrick came to talk to us about how important he thinks that's going to be for the cyclists. And I think it's, he certainly gave us a bit of a challenge to say that we don't have part-time footpaths, and we need to think about why it's acceptable to have, part-time clearways that allow for people to cycle on our roads. I just wanted to say as well that the change at Dixon Street of the relocation of the mobility parking, so that we're upgrading those parks to make them compliant, is fantastic. Love to see it. Just great to sort of see that gently, quietly, steadily rolling out across the city, to see that progress happening. I don't think I have anything additional to add. Can I have a seconder, please? Councillor Matthews.
I just wanted to say briefly, it was really good to see all the support for the traffic resolution in Island Bay as well. So, and to thank everybody, as well as thanking officers, to thank all of the people that let us know their views on these changes.
Okay, thank officers again for all the time that you put into this behind the scenes, and it is now time for us to vote. Well, I'm not sure how that...
It gets changed, doesn't it, if you say that it's
Well, I declare it carried anyway, unanimously or otherwise. Right, okay, we shall end our meeting with the closing Karakia.
Unuhia, unuhia. I te ara taka. Bakaria. Kia watia. Aira, kua watia.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, officers. And I declare the meeting closed at 10:30.